Well, Bobby, here we go. We're
Back in the
doing
kitchen on Friday.
yes, and just to have a chance to talk to people has been an exciting thing for me during this pandemic. I mean, recognizing that none of us have been through anything like this
We're all
before.
pioneers, yes.
Yes, and today we're looking at a very unusual word, the word FOOIE, which means family of origin impacts everything.
Which sounds a little grandiose, impacts everything, but it's amazing to me the number of times I realize I'm buying a product because the home I grew up in valued that product. I even know someone whose children all drive the same brand of car that their father says is best, and they're all married and they're all grown and they're still showing the impact of FOOIE that that brand is best.
Yes, I think of FOOIE, family of origin impacts everything, as what we learned in the home where we grew up, what we uh, caught by our parents, or also what was observed by us in the sense that we saw our parents do certain things. Like for instance, excuse me, I saw my father and mother have a disagreement, and my father would slam the newspaper down on the table and stomp out of the house. And my mother would just go over in a chair and just do a slow sigh, like, not anything I can do about that. And I decided as a teenager, I certainly don't want to do that. I'm going to go straight for the issue.
Yes, that's what you do. Unfortunately, you married someone else who had the impact of a different FOOIE training program regarding disagreements. And I watched my parents have disagreements, and I bought into my mother's style, which was to not acknowledge that there was anything going on, to try to change the subject, to smile, to be very polite. And so as a little girl, I thought that's what a woman was supposed to do when somebody was mad, including me. So I tried to do that with you, and very early I saw that it didn't work.
Well,
so there's some things that work for the adults in the home where we grew up, and we have those qualities that we observed and sometimes buy into, but they don't necessarily work with the people we love and live with now.
Yes, and that didn't work with me, but I still, even though I went straight for the issue, I couldn't talk about it because I didn't have a counterpart to talk with me. You smoothed it over.
Yes.
But then we got involved in marriage enrichment and we learned new skills.
Yes.
And we weren't limited to what we were brought up with.
This is just one example of how we had to work through some old issues that when we got to them turned out to be nothing more than just the training program we had both had when we were growing up. You reacted to yours, I bought into mine,
right?
But they were two different things.
Another thing we did is that we grew up in families for different reasons. We didn't learn to share feelings. And so what we did after we got involved in marriage enrichment, Bobby, was to practice sharing feelings for several, I want to say, years. We practiced sharing feelings by having a daily couple time, or what we called the daily dialogue, the daily sharing time. And so we would say, I feel, and we would write that down and then write down 3 feelings and share those feelings with each other. And before we knew we had feelings, but nobody ever asked us, so we had never experienced it.
Well, and my training program regarding feelings was not just that nobody asked, and so we didn't identify, we didn't acknowledge, we just experienced that feeling without ever connecting it to a reason why we had it. And my training program was even more rigid in that somehow I bought into the idea that nobody's really interested in your feelings. Okay. So you handle all those yourself. It's nobody's business. And I had a hard time sharing with you, even though I loved you and trusted you, it was hard to do.
Well, and as a result, you would do what you had done before we married, and that would be that you would work it out within your head. And
as an only child.
As an only child.
Yes.
I'm reminded of one couple that I had done premarital counseling with, and 2 months after their wedding, the young lady called and said, it's over. And I said, what do you mean it's over? She said, we can't communicate. And I said, well, come by my office and let's talk about it. And she did. And I said, well, what's going on? She said, we go in the kitchen and he starts moving the cutlery and the pans around and hollering at me. And then I said, well, what do you do? I go into the couch and sit down. And I said, let's look at what you observed his family do. Did you ever see them holler at each other and bang the pots and pans around in the kitchen, just move them around? And she said, all the time. I said, so he's sort of doing what he grew up with. And what did your family do? He said, well, if there was an argument or something that was a misunderstanding, I'd usually go to my bedroom and I would sit down on the bed, and mother or dad would come in and sit down and talk with me very softly. So you're doing what you did in your family of origin. And she caught it, went home and told him. And the next day I called and I said, okay, how goes it? She said, it's just wonderful. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, I told him about this and we both said we don't want to do that. And the whole point of it is the adults in the families where they grew up, they're not in this family. These are two different adults. So a new marriage is a brand new thing. It's pioneer territory, as we call it. Mm-hmm. So Bobby, why don't we, is there something that we do now that we're learning about how to deal with the FOOIE in our lives? Anything happening that's different these days?
Well, I think what's different for us is that we do feel like pioneers. We're having to carve out a whole new way of relating to each other because we're here all the time, or a lot of the time.
That's a good point.
And so we are seeing that getting in touch with FOOIE and getting in touch with why you say some of the things you say, or even think some of the things you think, is very helpful in just identifying it and acknowledging it. Because for me, there's no option unless I can acknowledge what I am doing or thinking.
Okay, unless you can see that I brought this with me.
Yes. And if I want to make changes, I can.
Yes.
That's what's really different is.
And you have. I want to add that I commend you for your efforts. It has not been your choice to speak out.
Yes.
And so you're doing that now, and I'm really grateful for it.
Well, thank you. One of the things that it is different for us is that as Mama B and Papa B,
yes,
we see the importance of time. And so
Not as in not having much time.
Not a lot left. So we're trying to make the most of it. And I want to tell you a quotation that has meant a lot to me in the last few days. This is from David Mays, who, as we have said, is one of our mentors. David and Vera Mays founded Marriage Enrichment many years ago and gave a lot of practical help to couples, just the average couple who are trying to love each other better.
Yes.
And this is what I found that David said.
And that's in our book on the marriage pioneers.
Yes. So, it's a book about David and
which is available on Amazon.
David and Vera and their wonderful ideas about how to do family. So here's what David said. Nothing is more central than this, that loving relationships can redeem and that they can sustain us in life's most difficult struggles. Now that has become very important to me in these days because we're certainly in a difficult struggle with the pandemic in Texas.
Right, that's so true. And then you add to it the Black Lives Matter and all that's happened in the death of several particular Black men and terrible ways of dying.
Yes. So it's a difficult struggle nationally, politically, physically, with all that's going on. So we are trying to use this time to build a stronger relationship between us.
We are.
And for me, getting in touch with FOOIE is one of those ways that is becoming very helpful to me, just to acknowledge what I do and what I say and make any changes that I want to.
Yes, and part of that is that we have a way of talking to each other that wants to listen and to give feedback to each other what the speaker has to say. And when that happens, the speaker sees that the listener understands and hears.
Yeah, but feedback is not editing, and feedback is not explaining. Feedback is just acknowledging that you heard what the other person said.
Like a mirror, like to reflect back what was there.
And that's very helpful to know that you're trying to understand how I feel about it.
Yes. And I feel really good about us doing that because, but also we do several things such as our couple time every day, which I think makes a whole lot of difference. It seems to me the more you talk about your relationship, the easier it is to talk about your relationship and to discover what is going on. And it's such an important thing.
Well, about FOOIE, I learned something years ago. We went to Australia. We were speakers at a marriage enrichment event there one time. Another time we went and did marriage enrichment in churches. And so one evening I told a story. We were talking about FOOIE, and it's important to couples to get a handle on, is this good for us? Do we both profit from this way of arguing, or this way of loving, or this way of discussing divided subjects? And so I told the story about a young couple, and he was sitting in the kitchen one day when his wife was preparing a ham, and he watched her cut one whole end off of the ham. Then she put it in the oven and cooked it. So he asked her about, why'd you cut the end off the ham? And she said, well, that's the way my mother did it. That's the way you cook a ham, I think. So he accepted it. But the next time they were with her mother, he asked her, do you cut the end off your ham before you cook it? And she said, yeah, I do. That's the way you cook a ham. And he said, well, why do you cut the end off of it? And she said, it's just the way you cook it. Don't you like my ham? So he was getting nowhere and he left it. But when he was with her grandmother, he asked about the ham. And she said, oh, yeah, I cut the end of it. Because when I was first married, we had a little bitty oven and it was not big enough for the whole ham. So I had to cut a big piece of it off. And that gave me a big lesson about how 3 generations ended up doing the same thing, but 2 of them had no idea why they were doing it. It's just what they observed in growing up. So I told this story, and to my surprise, they already knew it in Australia. They just said it was a leg of lamb instead of a ham. So I think this thing about FOOIE, about families of origin, about how easy it is to fall into habits that you don't even have to think about.
You don't think about, you just do.
Mm-hmm.
That's really true. And just as we close, Bobby, I think to realize that we are products of our family of origin.
And got some good things from them.
But we don't have to be prisoners.
That's good. Uh-huh.
So we need to realize that we have the opportunity and the ability to make changes, particularly in this pioneering time.
Yes. Well, we're Mama B and Papa B, and we're very happy to be with you today. And we look forward to any comments you want to make.
And thank you for tuning in today.
Yes.
Bye.